So welcome back, everybody, to That Blonde Girls podcast. My name is Carolyn. I am your host. If you guys are first-timers, welcome. If you guys are new, or if you guys are revisiting the podcast, welcome back. Now, before we dive into tonight's topic, the lighting, if you are watching the video version of this, which is on my YouTube channel, Reviews by the Blonde, if you guys are checking me out via the video, it's dark because I am shooting this in the evening/nighttime because life is hectic, life is busy, it's very difficult to squeeze everything in at a reasonable time while the sun is out, so here we are. I hope you guys don't mind the dark vibe of the video, but beyond that, grab a drink, whether it's stronger than, a coffee, or if it's alcoholic, grab yourself a drink and come on and join me in today's conversation. And today's conversation, as we prepare, or before we dive in, I will give everybody a heads up. Today's conversation is going to be like what it's like to be dating in modern time, and it's gonna revolve around my experiences with dating. I don't know, honestly, I've been thinking about doing this podcast now for like a week and a half, so I have a lot of feels. This might be separated into multiple podcasts because I don't feel like I can squeeze all of this into a reasonable into like one reasonable timed podcast. Not that podcasts need to be a specific time, and I definitely don't ever aim for this podcast to be a specific time limit, but this is a heavily loaded topic, and this is something that I think means a lot to me to share my experiences with, because I've had a lot of negative experiences. I have had a lot of experiences I've learned a lot from, and this is, I think, conversations, like we all have these conversations every single day about dating. So here we are, we're going to talk a little bit about my experience. I am double fisting it tonight. I have a glass of whiskey because we're going to be talking about my past and the choices I've made when it comes to dating. I need something stronger than coffee. And in my left hand, I have a cup of coffee, or what is left of my cup of coffee. But for tonight's whiskey choice, I am drinking whiskey, and whiskey bourbon. My apologies. It is Weller Special Reserve. I am in possession of two bottles. I have one that sits on my desk that I just stare at my proud acquirement of that bottle, and then I have a bottle that I cracked open a little while back. I was gonna buy a couple new bottles tonight and like do almost like a taste testing, but the LCBO I went to was very disappointing, so we're gonna have to like push that video and push that on to the weekend plans. So diving in, I don't know, I think, you know what, with a lot of the stuff that's been going on lately, which is going to be, I know the second I say this, it's going to take everybody into a certain mood, and it's going to take this podcast, and it's going to be like a hard right when I bring this topic up, but I feel like for me, it reminded me of some of the experiences that I've had with dating and online dating, and how it can be scary. And with a lot of the conversation around abortion and the laws that are coming around, and with a lot of women feeling up in arms about and being very vocal now and in the last year and 2 years about everything that's been going on with the abuse of power, with women being taken advantage of situations that happen that, nobody deserves to be in. Now, of course, before we really dive into this topic, I'm not going to make this whole podcast about abortion. I don't think that this is not the podcast for that. If you guys are interested in maybe having a conversation about it, because it is very relevant current times because of all the conversations happening, I do have opinions about it. And I feel like that could be a completely different podcast, and I definitely don't want to make this too serious, even though I feel like it definitely will. This isn't the podcast for that. I feel like I do need to throw a couple of disclaimers out there for any of the viewers, especially for any of you guys out there who are listening. I definitely don't want this podcast to be all about how much I hate men and men hating and hating all mankind. because I don't hate men, and I don't think all men suck, and I don't think all men are awful, and I do not exclusively believe that men are just capable of awful things. I am very much of the group of women can be just as awful as men. I've heard the stories. That's why when I was dating a lot, I always pried and asked a lot of guys about their experiences with dating, because I was always really, really curious to hear what their side of it was like. So as far as the dating spectrum goes and where this conversation is going to go, I'm not a man hater. I'm not. I've only ever seriously dated men. I've only ever dated men in my life. So all my negative experiences do surround men, and a lot of men are involved in all of my stories because I've only ever dated men. So I don't want it to sound like I hate all men, because I don't. I don't think all of you are awful. I think that I've experienced and I've met a lot of awful people. I've also met a lot of awful women. So I don't think that this conversation exclusively can be one-sided as far as when it comes to dating and people being in the wrong. I don't think it's just men. I want to make that very clear. The other thing I really want to make clear is that this is also my side of the story. There are obviously other people involved in these stories. There are other sides to these stories. This is my side of the story. I have always said from the very beginning on my public platforms, on my YouTube channel, on my Instagram, that I'm very open and honest, and I'm very willing to be very open and honest about my life and my experiences, especially if somebody can take something away from my experience and possibly give them a different perspective or help them not feel alone. So that's basically as far as where I'm coming from as far as these stories and my experiences with online dating and dating in general. I think we should dive into this podcast. I think it's finally time, now that we've had a 7-minute intro into this podcast and me just, making it clear that I don't hate all of you, I don't hate all people, or at least all men out there. I think it's time to dive into some of the stories and into some of my background. I do think it's fair to kind of throw out my personal experience with where I came from and what I kind of grew up in, because I think that definitely does give us it definitely paints a picture, and it explains a lot for me, it's explained a lot looking back on the choices that I made, the people that I dated, and I put that in air quotes, because a lot of the relationships I've been in have always been very complicated, and they haven't been black and white. They haven't been as simple as I've dated somebody for X period of time, and then, we put a title on it, and then we were in a relationship, and then things just either fizzled out, or they cheated, or this, that, and the other thing. It's never been that kind of clear cut for me. I've always had really complicated relationships, and I think definitely coming into 2017, 2018, 2019, and even 2016, going back even to 2015, the last couple of years of me dating in the world has definitely changed over the years. As far as kind of what I grew up in, I never really had a stable representation of what a relationship is supposed to look like. Things were pretty complicated at home, and it wasn't always, peaceful, and it wasn't loving, and it wasn't a great example of what a relationship is supposed to be. I don't blame my parents for their experience, because they're people, they're humans, they're not any different than I am, except for the fact that they're older and they're my parents. It's sad that it didn't work out for them, and I hope that I'm not a product of, history's past. I hope that I can move on with my life and grow as a person and learn from their mistakes. And I definitely feel like for many years, it took me a long time from, I think I was in, how do I even get into this? This is where it's a little complicated and a little hard to kind of just figure out what I should talk about and what I shouldn't talk about, because I want to get to the fun stories and funny stories, but there's also a lot of not so funny stories in my past. mostly because I didn't know what was to be expected. I didn't know if somebody was lying to me. I've always wanted to believe the good in people. I've wanted to believe, I'm of the mentality of, why should I believe anything different than what the person is telling me? And maybe that's very naive, and of course my mentality has changed now. And I have a very different perspective now than I did, obviously, when I did, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, even 3 years ago. It's a very different perspective. And it's definitely one that's matured. It's one that's, you've got to take what a lot of people say with a grain of rice until you spend a lot of time with them, until you talk to them. And I don't mean text. I mean, like, sit down in front of them and spend time with them and get to a place where you're comfortable, where you're being honest, you're talking, you're having serious conversations. I think that kind of environment can breed a healthy space where you can figure out, is this meant to be a friendship, or is this meant to be more, or can this be more? I think in the years that I've dated and had awful experiences with people lying and cheating and manipulating, I've dated a lot of manipulators and a lot of liars. And, I would have to say my first real experience in a relationship, it was with somebody that I had met in high school. It's somebody that also had a pretty chaotic home life and a chaotic past. It's somebody that dealt with a lot of issues that I was just not equipped to deal with at the age of 16. It's somebody that had his own issues and that knew how to manipulate the people around him that he knew cared. And I cared about him. I'm sure that he was probably the first person I told that I loved him. Looking back on it, was it love? No, it wasn't. And I can look back on that now and know that for a fact that it wasn't. It was somebody that I really, really cared about. It was somebody that I wanted the best for. It's somebody that I wanted to see happy, and it's somebody that I really just didn't want to see hurt. Because of the fact that his life was so chaotic, because of the fact that he had been through so much. And I think we all go through a lot of things, but I think it comes at a point in time in our lives where we're no longer the victims, where we're no longer the people that have suffered through those things. I think it comes to a point where you need to make a decision of, yes, I've been through those things. Yes, I accept them to some extent. I understand that it wasn't right. I understand that it wasn't good. It shouldn't have happened. It was out of my control. But to some extent, I need to make peace with this so I can let it go and have it not rule so much of my life. And I met a lot of people like that just held on to so much of their past and constantly would say that they were damaged or they were broken. And you know what, I'm probably very guilty of saying that in the past as well. I'm not saying I'm not perfect in these situations. I'm not saying that I was 100% the victim, that I never did anything wrong, and I will definitely admit to you guys when I believe that I did anything wrong. I'm gonna take a drink because I already feel like I need a drink. I definitely have no issue with admitting when I was wrong and when I lied, or if I manipulated, or if I did something that I probably shouldn't have, or, if I was an asshole or bitch, because I very much have a lot of anxiety, and I definitely now know the differences of when I need to turn the bitch mode off and when I am just struggling with a lot of anxiety. And now for me, it's just figuring out how to communicate with the people around me for them to understand, hey, I'm just having a hard time. This isn't something to do with you. It has nothing to do with you, probably. It has more to do with me, and I don't know how to communicate that with you, and that I just need my space, and that I need to figure it out on my own. But that, again, that takes time. And I think my biggest lessons that I learned right off the bat, if I can give anybody, if you don't want to listen to an hour-long podcast or however long this podcast is going to end up being, if my best piece of advice that I can give you 14 minutes in is that you need to figure out what you want in your life. You need to figure out what makes you happy. You need to come to a place where you are comfortable, where you are happy, where you feel fulfilled in your everyday life, where it doesn't rely on other people, where it doesn't rely on friendships necessarily, where it doesn't necessarily rely on the romantic relationships in your life, where you feel fulfilled as a human being on your own. From there, if you have that healthy baseline in your life, you can start understanding and mentally figuring out how to take steps forward, whether it's figuring out what you want for yourself in your life, and then how you can communicate that. Once you kind of figure out what you want in life and what makes you happy and kind of what makes you feel whole as a person, I think at that point it's easier to communicate that to somebody else. And then it's a little bit easier when you're genuinely getting to that point in your life where you feel fulfilled alone, and you're kind of, when you're kind of ready to move forward into involving somebody seriously in your life, then those serious conversations, it makes dating very easy because it almost does become a checklist. I'm not saying that it has to be a checklist. I'm not saying that dating always should be that way, but I feel like once you kind of get to that point where you know what you want out of life and what you want out of a partner, or have an idea what you want out of, somebody that you're going to spend a lot of time with, it's very easy to kind of pick and choose and figure that out, especially in this dating world that we're in now, when it's super quick, you get people for like 2 seconds. When you get their attention for like 2 seconds, it's very easy to figure out quickly what somebody wants and what somebody doesn't want. I feel like I skipped ahead a little bit. I feel like I do need to express, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the one important quote-unquote relationship that I had for many, many years. It was on and off for almost 5 years. It was a very important, it's an important part to this entire story because that person impacted my life for so many years in good ways and a lot of bad ways. This person was the very first person I had ever fell in love with unconditionally. And what that means is, to me, is that I would have literally done anything for this person. And I did for many, 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 many years. This was an on and off relationship. We would end things. We would not talk for a year. We would go for like a year not talking. And then all of a sudden we'd either run into each other or we would message each other, I think it was mostly we would run into each other, and then our worlds would collide and we would start talking again, and we would kind of just fall right back into it because it was that easy. For me, looking back on that relationship now, I'm not going to take away the fact that I loved him unconditionally, because that's just, it is what it is. I can't hide away from that. I can't deny that anymore. It's something that I've come to terms with and I understand is a part of my past. It was a relationship that, I don't know where I was going with that thought. It was a relationship that I learned a lot from. It was complicated in all the wrong ways. It was the fact that it was complicated, the fact that it never had a title, the fact that he lied to me, the fact that he cheated on me multiple times, the fact that I learned about all the awful things he did years later is sad. I think it's awful that still to this present day he hasn't apologized to me, which I think if I hold on to anything from this past relationship is the fact that he still hasn't had the balls to apologize to me. And this person was such a massive part of my life. We would spend Friday through Sunday together for years. We would go on mini road trips together. We would, we did everything together for many, many years. And this person, I hate the fact that every time, I think it's not that he's leaving me speechless. It's not that talking about this relationship leaves me speechless. It's the fact that anytime I think back to it now, honestly, I draw a really hard blank, mostly because I think I've tried to block a lot of it out, because for me to move on forward in my life, I've had to do so. But because this person was such an integral part of my life, once it really ended for good, I had such a hard time with the breakup. I didn't know how to sleep. I had so much anxiety of sleeping alone. It really, really was hard. Like, it took me, I think, 2 months for me to finally feel comfortable in my own bed. And the ironic thing is he never actually slept over at my place. He never slept in my bed. But I had such a hard time being alone. I had a hard time being in public. I couldn't be around people. I was super anxious around people. I had a hard time looking people in the eyes. My trust in humanity basically was gone. And maybe that's a very dramatic way of talking about it, but that's how much weight this person had in my life. I relied on him for a lot, in the sense that I felt like he would be the only person that would ever love me, even though he never told me he loved me. I felt like he was going to be the only person that ever accepted for me for my weirdness and all the weird shit that I would do and my tics and how I looked and who I was and the things I was into. And even though I know, thinking back to that relationship now, I know there was like a lot of things that I know he didn't like, or things that he thought was weird, or at least the way at the time, the way he would react to some of those things. It wasn't love. That wasn't love, the way he reacted. It was, just like, I'm banging her, so I'm just gonna kind of put up with it, I think. At least for the time being, that's the way, thinking back to it, that's how I feel about it now. And I can't say that for a fact that I've only had conversations with people who have gotten the honest side or the true story out of him when it came to me. So I haven't actually ever had a conversation with him about his feelings or how he felt. Again, we've never had this conversation, so I'm only speaking to the people that have gotten the side of it, which is crazy to me. But that's how much of myself I had tied up into this relationship. And I think realizing it now, I think it was a lesson that I had to learn. It was a hard lesson that I learned 2 years ago. When it came to relationships, my biggest problem was creating a fantasy person in my mind that didn't actually exist. And that was hard to come to terms with. I guess a lot of people could maybe relate to it in the sense that maybe making excuses for the things that people have done. It was kind of my coping mechanism and my way of making excuses, in a sense of building this person up to be somebody they actually weren't in my mind. And that's how I kind of got through the relationship. That's kind of how I dealt with it, and that's kind of how I put up with it as long as I did, because this person that I had created in my mind wasn't the person that was in front of me. And then 2 years later and months later, days later, years later, to find out the reality, the real person that was even behind that person, was hard. I had, for like years, I had found out stories that he had cheated on me, and he had cheated on me with a pregnant girl. He had, he had been sleeping with people behind my back without telling me. The final straw for me was 3 years ago. It's actually more than 3 years ago, but 3 years ago on New Year's Eve, this person, we had kind of broken ties at that point. Like, he had made it very clear that he was no longer in love with me, that he didn't want a relationship with me, and yet he was still messaging me as if he was still interested, which made things really hard and confusing. because I think at that time I wasn't in love with him, but I think I was infatuated with the idea of possibly him getting out of his drug problems and him getting out of his like mental problems that had a lot to do with his drug use and his, and all of that, and him sobering up and us being able to finally create a life for ourselves together. The straw that broke the camel's back in that relationship was on New Year's 3 years ago, New Year's Eve. That entire like week and a half prior, I had gotten really sick to the point where I was throwing up every single day, and I was not keeping anything down, water, fluids, like nothing. I ended up going to the hospital the day before New Year's, and then New Year's Eve, and then on New Year's Eve I was still throwing up, and the doctors at the hospital the night before had told me if I can't still keep anything down, I have to go back because I'm so dehydrated that it's dangerous, so I need to go back to get fluids pumped into me. So at this point, it had been like a week and a half. That morning of New Year's Eve, I woke up with vomiting, and I was throwing up blood, which was, is scary for anybody. Sorry that this is TMI, but that was the situation. That was the situation I was kind of in. And then I decided to take a shower, and I remember like washing my face and like running my hands across my face or down my face, and then looking down, and my hands were just covered in blood. And I don't think I've ever gotten out of a tub faster in my life, even though I had like been deathly ill for like, it's the fastest I had moved in like a week and a half. I looked in the mirror and realized that my nose was bleeding, and I had never gotten a nosebleed. That was the first time I was getting a nosebleed, and basically I think it was just because I was violently throwing up so much that everything, like my the vessels in just like my sinuses and everything in my throat were just bursting, because that's what happens after a week and a half of just constant abuse in that way. So at this point I was really, really scared out of my mind. And I remember going to the hospital on New Year's Eve, and I remember my mom getting home from work, and we got into an Uber, we went to a hospital, and I remember messaging him and being like, I'm really scared, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I'm still so sick. Nothing is working. None of the meds are working, and I really wish you were here, and I really wish you would come. And my mom was just like, I think my mom and I haven't necessarily always had the closest relationship, in the sense that she has known everything about all my relationships. In the past couple of years, I've opened up more to her, and I've kind of told her about what happened. But at the time, she's just like, a mom knows. A mom doesn't, you don't need to tell a mom. A mom always knows. And she's just like, why isn't it, this, if anything's going to explain, why this person isn't good for you, this is the reason. He's not, why isn't he driving you? Why isn't he here? Why does he not care? And that night was finally the realization for me of why this person wasn't good for me, and why and I needed to have that moment to realize that he didn't care. And it wasn't until I think about 6 or 7 months later, here's the kicker. So everybody, just grab your glass of whatever you're having, and, just have a drink for me. Cheers to all of you lovely people listening out there. Let's just have a moment. The reason he didn't show up at the hospital that night, all he could send me was a text saying, I'm sorry. The reason he didn't show up that night, which I found out 6-7 months later, was because instead he chose to bring 2 girls home and try and have a threesome with them. And I know this for a fact because I got this story from his roommate, who was his best friend at the time, who lived with him and who was there, and who had one of the girls on her couch, like, come downstairs, and who clearly was high on something and was, like, freaking out or just, acting really weird. I got this story from her, and that was, if I needed anything to seal the envelope at that point and shut the book on that person, having that person in my life, it was that story. I think that if somebody doesn't care enough to show up for you at a time of need, they don't care. And I don't think nobody could have convinced me otherwise. And I don't want any of you to think that, hey, like, you know, where were your friends? Why didn't your friends tell you? Why didn't anybody tell you to, like, get out of this relationship? I am an incredibly hard-headed person. I am incredibly independent. I love my friends. I care about my friends' opinion. But at the end of the day, I am one of those people that needs to learn the hard way sometimes, and I need to learn for myself, because if I don't, I'm going to always wonder why, and I'm always going to regret it, not figuring out why. So for any of you who may be listening to this and may think like, why wouldn't you, you know, if he refused to tell you he loved you, the fact that he refused to meet your parents or your mom, or the fact that he refused to do certain things, and the fact that he forced you into certain situations, or, you know, as much as he had a drug problem, I do have to say, and this is the sad thing, unless he, you know, the one thing that he never did was force anything on me that as far as drugs go, he very much kept that away from me, and he always respected that for me, at least since the beginning. Even when it came to weed years ago, and we're talking like, you know, 6 or 7 years ago, when weed wasn't legal and when it was still kind of that weird thing, and it was the one thing that I like still hadn't tried, and it just I wasn't interested in. I was really scared, and I didn't want to do it without, you know, trying it with somebody that I actually trusted. But beyond that, like, he never put me in a situation where, you know, I was feeling forced to do anything. And to this day, I can safely say I've never done any serious drugs. Beyond smoking weed, which I have no problem admitting, I've never touched drugs in my life. And they've never really held any interest for me. I don't like the idea of putting myself in a situation where I have no control over my body or my mind. I don't like that idea, and that scares me. I know my limits with alcohol, and I'm comfortable with alcohol, but beyond that, not really into it. Not my thing. It's never been my thing. Not interested. My health at this point in my life is more important to me than, you know, a possible fun night or whatever. But yeah, it needed to come to that point for me to kind of step away and understand that this isn't healthy. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, looking back on that relationship reflected a lot of what my parents' relationship was like. And it was a giant wake-up call for me. And it took me a long time after that. It took me, I think, like a year or two to finally get back into the mentality of dating. And now we're going to try and get out of that really sad story and get into the fun side of, you know, the online dating, the Tinder, the Bumble, the just disastrous dates out there that I had, and the funny ones and the fun ones and the nice people I met along the way as well. It took me a long time to kind of move forward, and I do feel like everybody does need to experience what it's like to have a one-night stand, not because of the sex part, but just what it feels like to kind of have that freedom and to get rid of any sort of guilt that you may have. I grew up Catholic. I have a whole lot of Catholic guilt. I'm getting past it every single day, and I'm in a wonderful relationship now where we're getting past both of our religious pasts. So as far as that goes, if any of you hold any weird guilt around sex, I think one-night stands are good for a period of time. I think it teaches you that it's okay, whether you're a man or a woman, to do as you please, as long as both parties or multiple parties are being safe and everybody is comfortable and everybody agrees. I think that those experiences are healthy, and I think they are normal, and I think everybody should have those experiences, because it really teaches you what your needs are. It helps you, I think it teaches you a lot about yourself, and it helps you understand what you need to feel fulfilled on that aspect. And I think for me, sex is really important when it comes to relationships and everyday life. I find that it's really important for me. I think that it bonds people. I think that it creates another level of trust that verbally you can't necessarily, verbally it just doesn't create, or like verbally talking, you can only get so far, where I feel like physically you really build a level of trust that's really important, with building, I think, a healthy, this move, if you're watching me in the video, I think this move describes it the best, which I'm just kind of like wiggling. I feel like it's important in a relationship. I don't think it defines a relationship, but I think it is important. It's important because I think it also opens up communication and questions, and it opens up a whole nother level of conversation. So I think that for me, when it came to one night stands, I did do stupid shit that I'm not proud of. I always recommend that everybody's safe about it. Always, ladies, this is for you. After a certain point, very quickly, I realized that a lot of guys don't carry condoms with them, and they don't give a fuck. A lot of guys don't. I'm not saying all do. A lot of guys do care, but a lot of guys don't. So ladies, whether it's, a Magnum or a regular size, whatever, buy a box, keep it in your bathroom, and keep a couple in whatever purse you're taking with you on a night out. Because at the end of the day, you've got to protect yourself. You got to take care of number one. And that's kind of the mentality I've had for many years. Being the independent person that I am, and the independent woman that I am, and that's deeply ingrained into who I am because of my mother and because of the things that I've been through over the years and the experiences that I've had. That is who I am, and I'm very comfortable admitting that. I am who I am, and I am where I am today in life and have what I have because I've earned it all myself, and I refuse to be bought by anybody. I refuse to owe anybody anything, and I am content with, being happy in my solitude, and that's what I need for myself. I needed that for myself so I could move forward in a healthy, happy, pace in life. I'm just gonna put my hair up because I'm sweating balls. I think the whiskey bourbon is kicking in. So I'm gonna have another sip because why not? So good. For me, when it came to dating, I needed to make sure that I was safe, that I was doing whatever I wanted to do, and I was trying a lot of things, finally, that I felt like, for a long time, the way I looked at it was like, why does my ex get to be happy? Why does he get to have what his ideal relationship would be, but I don't get to have those experiences and I don't get to have that life? Fuck him. Fuck that scared mentality. I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna be safe about it, and I'm gonna be very conscious of what I'm doing, and I'm not going to, I'm not gonna catch feelings. I'm gonna figure it out, and I'm gonna do what I want to do. And yes, I caught feelings. Yes, there were plenty of times where I got kicked out at the end of the night. I got kicked out right afterwards. I didn't get to make it till morning. I didn't even get to make it that night. Like, people would, ask me to leave right then and there. And it was one of those things where I got over being offended. I got over being hurt. I understood the difference. I think, in the 2 to 3 years that I really put myself out there and dated, I learned the difference between what it's like to have sex while dating and what it's like to have sex while being in a relationship and with somebody that you genuinely care about. I learned those differences, and that was important for me to learn. It was important for me to learn those things because it made me realize that I didn't want to perpetually be sleeping around. I didn't want to constantly be, I didn't want to be in that cycle anymore. And I quickly realized that I didn't like that cycle. I quickly realized that I was over that cycle. And the constant, the Tinder dates, excuse me, sorry for the headphone listeners. Cough. My apologies. I quickly realized that, there were points in time where I was going on Tinder dates 3 times a week, and I started to realize that I started to grow this really bad habit of if I knew that I wasn't interested in the guy, I would actually pay for the date, because I knew that I would, by the end of the night or like by the next morning, would be messaging them and being like, hey, I'm not interested. It's, you're a wonderful person, or, you're not a wonderful person, or you're a wonderful person, but it's not there for me. The spark's not there for me. And again, I knew what I was looking for, and I started bits and pieces, started to figure out. It took me some time. Like, again, this, sometimes for some people it happens overnight. For me, it took like 2 to 3 years to figure out like what I wanted. For a period of time, I enjoyed being single. I enjoyed going on dates. I enjoyed, meeting random people. And then over time, I realized that I was getting tired of it. It was kind of getting expensive, which I also was kind of frustrated with. But at the same time, not frustrated with because, not because the guy wouldn't pay, but because, I was taking on that responsibility. And it's not that there were plenty of guys that wanted to pay. And I'm not going to take that away from them. I'm not taking that away from you guys. But yeah, I don't know. It started getting expensive, taking the Ubers, getting dressed up, and then going to work the next day. Like, it was exhausting. And especially because here is my giant gripe with dating online. And the third big lesson for any of you who are seriously looking to get into a serious mode with somebody, or to seriously try and figure out whether or not the other person, you can click with, or actually if there's anything there, the fastest way to actually figure that out is to be one-on-one with the person and like face-to-face. I learned very quickly that yes, Tinder and Bumble and all those other apps have their benefits of meeting people that you wouldn't necessarily meet in everyday life. You shuffle through hundreds of people very quickly, and you have access to hundreds of people that you wouldn't necessarily in your everyday life. Especially, I understand why those apps are incredibly useful to the people in my age group and the people in other age groups where we have full-time jobs or full-time careers or full-time just lives, where we don't necessarily have time to go out every single night, or to even have time to go out to those like recreational activities where you do it in a group setting. Like, some of us don't have that time. Like, I work a 9 to 6 job where 8:30 to 6:30 job where I come home, late every single night. I have to do a podcast, or I don't have to, I want to do a podcast or a video, or, I try and squeeze it in at the end of the day, or I have to do editing, or, or I want to sit down and eat dinner at a normal time, or I have to squeeze in working out. Like, this is why I've gained weight. It's because I've stopped caring. My health has gone to shit. Not because I have stopped working out, but because my body's doing weird things that my doctors and I are trying to figure out what's going on. But also because I'm just tired at the end of the day. And it's hard. It's hard to be motivated to then put on a full face of makeup, get dressed up all pretty, do the hair, and then mission downtown to sit, across from somebody who I have nothing in common with, or who I have no spark with, but we both happen to swipe right, and here we are. And it's defeating to get to a date, and after all of that time and effort, to figure out probably within 10 minutes time that it's not going to go anywhere, or there isn't a common ground, or there's really no interest there, or there's no spark. So yes, I see the positives, the positives and the negatives of online dating. And my God, I guess this is the part of the podcast where I finally admit that I am in a finally fully functioning adult relationship that isn't complicated in any way, shape, or form. It is a normal, healthy, respectful, trustworthy built relationship that came from online dating. We both met on, I think it was Bumble, and we matched on Bumble. That night, we talked for, I think, like 20 minutes. We had things in common. There was a fairly healthy banter. And he asked me out for a date on Wednesday. And I was like, what are you doing right now? And he's like, nothing. I'm like, so what about right now? And we ended up hanging out. Well, I ended up getting dressed, taking an Uber downtown Toronto. It was we ended up, our first date was on, I think we figured out it was January 23rd. And it was like -40 plus wind chill that night. It was a bloody cold night. I remember we met at a bar that I had been to plenty of times before. I went to OCAD, and ironically so did he. So we went to a local bar that we all know very well, and we hung out. We had drinks. It was great. It was hilarious. We were like two of like four people there, and the server that we had was hilarious and wonderful, and he made it more awkward than it needed to be, and it was great, and we just had a great time, and it was very quick. It was very easy for me to realize quickly that this person had a spark that I was interested in, and we figured out very quickly that there was something there for us. And 3.5 months in, almost 4 months in now, and we've been together ever since. Yes, I've had dates where they've ended hilariously quick. There have been dates where I've been on, I think, maybe last 30 minutes, where quickly either the conversation was, we had nothing in common, I didn't relate to them in any way, shape, or form. There were people that had situations in their lives where I remember going on a date with a guy that had a son, and it wasn't the fact that he had a son that turned me off, but it was mostly because he had such a complicated relationship with the son's mother, and it wasn't because it was any disrespect to her or to him, but it seemed like his life there was a lot going on for him to add another person into that, let alone another relationship into that. And it was just a little bit too much for me. And so that didn't go beyond a first date. And then weirdly enough, that guy, I think, we followed each other on Instagram, and less than a week later, he was making out with some other chick anyways. And I was like, okay, that was a little weird. So, what were your intentions, sir? And I think that what I quickly realized was I needed to be straightforward, and I had finally definitely hit a wall of where I don't want to sleep around anymore, and I'm not into the one-night stands anymore, and I want to meet people for substance. I want to meet people for conversations and get to know them on a genuine level, and I learned to have zero expectations with everybody, and it's almost best to kind of go into things that way, no matter how good looking they are, no matter how boastful they seem to be via their photos. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. At the end of the day, you can tell somebody of their substance the second, within 10 to 15 minutes into their conversation, unless you're terrible at conversations. You can ask them questions and pretty quickly figure out what are they about. So I feel as though I learned just as upfront as guys were being about banging or just wanting to get laid, I was just as upfront asking them what they wanted and making it very clear to them that, hey, there's no shame in your game. If you just want to get laid, I don't care. Have fun. That was the other problem. I found a lot of the guys I was meeting on Tinder and Bumble, they had just gotten out of long-term relationships and they didn't want anything serious and they just wanted to have fun. I don't blame you guys for that, because I was in that boat with you for some period of time as well. I don't shame anybody for that, but I do feel as though if that is your honest game, you need to be upfront about it. Yeah, you're not necessarily going to you're not going to get into you may not be in as many situations with a lot of girls that are as down, but from what I've heard, there's plenty of girls that are just down for getting laid. So hey, just be honest and be upfront about what you're looking for. It saves a lot of people time and grief. And so I started to just be super upfront, be like, hey, like, what are you looking for? Are you looking to just get laid? Hey, if that's what it is, on to the next. There's plenty of girls out there. Have fun. Like, go on, move on. You'll be just fine. So that's a big piece of advice for any of the men and women out there. From my experience, is just be super upfront, be honest. It's gonna save a lot of you all just time. It's gonna save a lot of time. It's gonna save you from ghosting people. I mean, I've had a lot of people ghost me, and I think that was one of the hardest things to kind of go through with online dating, was the ghosting. I'm sure I have done it once or twice before in the past, and I'm not proud of it, especially because of the amount of times that I've been ghosted. It's the worst feeling in the world. It is hard to let people down and say, hey, I'm just not interested. And you know what? You don't need to be nasty or rude about it. I think just even saying that, like saying, hey, you don't need to come up with a million excuses. You don't need to say, hey, you're wonderful at this, that, and the other thing. I think just being open and honest and being like, hey, I'm just not interested, is a fair enough place to start. You may get some negative reactions. I've had plenty of guys when I've said that, go off and call me a bitch and call me fat and call me ugly and say they were just gonna sleep with me anyways. I'm not offended. I'm not bothered. Hey, if that makes you feel better, do you feel better? You're gonna sleep better tonight because you're gonna say that to me? Hey, have at it. I don't mind taking the bullet for all the ladies that maybe are offended or really hurt by those kind of comments. I have no problem taking that kind of hit for the massive egos and insecurities that those guys go through, to have to say that to another person. But I do feel like, if just being open and honest with somebody is gonna save, in the long run, it's gonna save that person grief. It may not be fun right now to kind of crush their hopes, but 2 weeks from now, it's gonna be a hell of a lot harder. I've had a lot of guys lie. I think the one story I did want to share, that was kind of weird. I had a guy absolutely lie through his teeth and use the whole line of manipulation of, I grew up with sisters and a mom, and I grew up with all sisters and I respect women. I got to his apartment. Within the first 5 minutes of being at his place, he tried to literally shove his hands down my pants. And I'm not joking. Like, he kept trying, and I kept having to literally shove him off of me, to the point where I think I nearly shoved him off the couch. And I couldn't believe the fucking bullshit of all of that. I couldn't believe that this guy had literally lied through his teeth and wasted my money for me to Uber down there just to, to have to go through that. I think the weirdest part was that sometime much later on, I came across his profile on Tinder again, and he was just like, for the ladies out there that are like, what do you expect? Like, you all know what we want when we're on here. I'm sorry, but I don't want to assume the worst in men. I don't want to assume that every guy just wants to fuck me and that's all it is. Like, I don't assume that kind of stuff about people, and I don't want to assume. I think that's the difference. I did make a note because I had this thought the other day, and I wrote it down because I thought it was interesting. I shouldn't have to assume all men are pigs, and I really don't want to. And especially that comment about that guy, I think that obviously reflects one group of men. I don't think that reflects all men or all people in general. But I don't want to assume people are pigs. I don't want to assume the worst in people, that all people have that mentality of, I'm just going to lie through my teeth just so I can get laid. I think that's awful. I don't want to assume that kind of shit about people. But unfortunately, you do have to come to a point in dating where you do need to protect yourself. And if something feels off, if something doesn't feel right, if you don't feel comfortable, whether you're a man or a woman, you have every right to be like, nope, I'm done. I'm like, just like a flick of a switch, you have every right to get up and leave. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter where you are. You have every right as a human being to get the fuck up and walk out or walk away. Nobody's holding you down. Don't have any guilt about how you're gonna look or what they're gonna think, what the people around you are gonna think. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. If you don't feel comfortable, if you aren't in a safe situation, You need to walk away from those situations. I do have a story that's kind of dark and that I do want to share on this podcast with all of you, because I think there are a lot of lessons that could be learned, one or the other, whichever one's right. English, it's hard. That I experienced about 2 years ago now, I think about 2 years ago. I think it was about 2 years ago now. I did do a video about it sometime after it had happened, so if you guys want to watch that video, I will leave a link in the description box down below if you guys want to check that video out. It was very raw. It was a video that I didn't want to get views from or monetize for the fact that I could make money off of it. It was honestly just making that video helped me come to terms and helped me process what had actually happened, because the people in my life that I kept bringing up the story to, I just don't think anybody knew how to deal with it. I don't blame them for it. I think it's just something nobody I had known at the time and that was close to me had ever experienced or ever been through. It was a first date, and the only date I had gone on with a guy from Tinder that I had met on Tinder that ended up, from what I gathered of the situation, ended up drugging me. And I had never been drugged before. A lot of people asked me, are you sure you weren't drunk? I have been drunk many a times prior to this situation, and I knew something was wrong pretty quickly. It took about 20 to 30 minutes after getting up and moving from the one bar to the next to realize something was off and something was wrong. He was a server / bartender at the restaurant we were meeting at, and he made my drink. I can't for a fact say that he did it because I didn't see him do it. I never got physical proof that he did do it. I never reported him, and looking back on it now, it took me a really long time. I mean, I figured it out pretty quickly within the first, the day after, and the second day, the first day or two after, but I almost didn't believe it, and I didn't understand because I had never taken drugs. I never really understood, I didn't understand the feeling. I didn't know the side effects. I didn't know the actual effects of what was going on. And it took me a really long time to kind of put two and two together and figure it out. And I mean, realistically, I should have gone to the hospital that night. Instead of calling an Uber, I should have called 911. And I walked away from that situation. Going into that situation, I had this really off, weird gut feeling. And I think it's one of those things, whether you believe in fate, whether you believe in, supernatural things, or if you're faithful or spiritual or whatever, or believe in a gut feeling or not, I think that internally, when you have a gut feeling, it's because you're reacting to something deep down inside your brain where you've seen or witnessed or experienced something before that's setting off red lights and it's flashing big red flags and is telling you, hey, BT dubs, something about this is wrong. Something about this is not right. And in that night, there were a lot of those red flags from point A to point B to point C. It is a scary situation, but I was able to I walked away from that situation mostly because the guy was, he was a little bit shorter than me. He didn't really put up much of a fight. But I think the reason I really wanted to talk about this story was because, if that guy had 30, 40 pounds on me, if he had that weight on me, as much as I like to play big and bad and tough, and as much as I'm not afraid of getting physical, as much as I'm not afraid of defending myself in any way, shape, or form, I don't care if it's me or you, it's gonna be you. As much as I have that mentality inside my head, looking back on that situation that happened years ago, the reality is if that guy wanted to do something to me and he had the weight and the strength, he probably could have. And that's the sadder part. I think that's the scary part of this whole situation, is for me to realize that I am very much one of those women that had something happen to them. And I never wanted to be victimized in my life, whether it was my family shit, whether it was, the dating drama or any aspect. I never wanted to play the victim. And I think that it's a sign of weakness, and I never want to seem like the person that's jumping on the bandwagon, and I think that this stuttering, this fear that that I'm experiencing right now, and that's kind of coming out right now about this whole situation and about this experience, I think that's what a lot of people feel when they have had this dark experience, whatever it is, and they try to share it with somebody. I think you never want to feel like the victim. You never want to play the victim card, or you never want to, I don't know, at least I never want to, that's for me. I don't want to speak for anybody. I shouldn't speak for anybody, but for me, I never wanted to be the victim in this. I never wanted to be that person. I prided on myself never doing drugs. I prided on myself never needing any sort of substances to kind of, to be happy and to live a normal life. And that night rocked me and physically fucked me up for a month and a half. Like, physically, my body didn't feel balanced and normal for a very long time. So to this day, I don't know what it was. I did actually he texted me days after the situation, after the date, and tried to act like it was all normal, like nothing happened, and I did put him on the spot, and I did ask him if he did anything, and of course he denied it. So I do want to share that aspect of the story, is that he did deny it. I don't want to hide that from you all. He did deny the fact that he didn't do anything, but I don't know what happened. At the end of the day, all I know is what happened to me, and when I got home and the day after and the weeks after, and looking back on that story and remembering every aspect of it, and it was scary. And to fathom the fact that somebody was willing to go as far as putting something into my drink to manipulate me into doing something that I didn't want to do is horrifying. And the fact that people like that exist, and the fact that people are willing to do that, is crazy to me. And I can't fathom that. I don't want to believe the worst in people. I don't want to assume all men are going to do this. And the one thing I want to make clear, I've actually had male friends tell me that they've also been drugged by women. So this goes both ways. I don't want to put this all on the men out there. I've heard these kinds of stories with guys explaining the fact that women have drugged them. And I think that's awful. And I think that's fucked up. And I don't think it's right on either party for any human being to do that to another human being. And that is the one thing that just makes me so angry. And I put my foot down through and through after going through it and thinking about it and thinking about what could have happened versus what happened, and the fact that I'm an asshole enough, and the fact that I even have to say that, the fact that I have to, as a person, I have to come across as a rude asshole bitch to a guy that won't stop catcalling me or won't stop bothering me, or who has the audacity to come up to me and say, hey, why don't you smile, because you look prettier with a smile on your face. You know why I don't have a smile on my face the majority of the time? Is because if I seem welcoming, it welcomes everybody. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And for me to be able to walk down the street and feel safe, yeah, I gotta look like I've got resting bitch face. I have to clench my keys in my pocket. I have to have a knife in my purse. I have to walk around with pepper spray, which is bear spray, in my purse. I have had to do those things in the past, and I have to do those things to feel safe. And that is awful for anyone to have to do. I don't think it's exclusive to just women. I think a lot of women can relate to that, but I don't think it's exclusive just to women. As a woman and as a female, I've had to do all those things, and I haven't had to come to terms with that or realize that until recent times. And it's hard. It's hard to admit the fact that I relate to a lot of the women out there that are kind of going into like the extremist feminist side, which I don't necessarily agree with a lot of, but the fact that I 100% in those aspects, I relate to a lot of women who have had to do those things. And a lot of people kind of like look at me sideways when I say I have a knife in my purse, or like you find out that I've walked around with pepper spray, or I've had people run up right behind me. I've had a guy, there was a huge like 6-foot-something guy in my neighborhood in the middle of the night running up behind me, and like my weird spidey senses felt something, and I turned around and realized realized there was somebody running up to me. And yeah, I freaked the fuck out because there was some random person running right at me for no reason whatsoever, and he like looked at me, and I stopped, and I'm like, can I help you? And he's just like, you have to come with me now. And I'm like, get bent. And I started walking, and then I realized he started following me, and I had to start physically running away from this person. And I had to run across the street. I had nothing on me physically, so if that guy wanted to really do damage, he could have with no issue whatsoever. Like, I had nothing on me. I was in like a short heel, so I mean, realistically, I could have done a mad dash and a mad sprint. I didn't sprint off, but I did run away. The fact that I have to do that, and I have to think about that, and I have to constantly be aware, not just because of the area that I live in, or not because I'm in a different part of the city, or this, that, and the other thing. I'm constantly aware of the people around me. I'm always constantly trying to be aware of the people around me. And the fact that I have to walk around with that level of anxiety sometimes kind of sucks. Yeah. So, I mean, the point of that story was, beyond the kind of feminist rant to that side of it, and just the humanity rant of it all. I don't think it's a feminist issue. I think it's a human issue. I don't think anybody should ever be in a situation where somebody drugs them. But I think the big lesson from that story is, for all of you who are going out on dates, be aware. I don't think that we should all assume that the person across from you is going to put something in your drink, but be aware of your drink. Be aware of, where you are. Maybe make friends with your server. Always make friends with your bartenders, because at the end of the day, your bartenders are going to be the people that look out for you. As a woman, that is one of the first things I go to, and I've done in the past, when I go to bars alone. And I used to do that a lot. I would go to bars and restaurants a lot alone, and I loved it. I would always sit at the bar because I could make friends with the bartender. I could always chat with them. They were going to be there. And I would always, because I'm a giant whiskey lover and a bourbon lover, and love, alcohol and cocktails, and I love that world. It was easy to obviously make friends with the bartender. But if you need somebody to look out for you and you've gone out alone, those people will be the ones, generally the good ones, and there's a lot of great bartenders out there. They will be the ones that look out for you. So that is my advice. Just be very aware. Don't be naive with the situations you walk into. Be aware that whether you're a man or a woman having somebody pick you up on a first date, just take an Uber. Meet them there. Scope them out, figure it out if, they're good or bad. It's hard. I hate to have to sit here and be like, you have to consider the fact that this person now has your address, or this person's going to hurt you, or they're going to show up in their car. But be very aware of the setting you're getting into. Be aware of the fact that they may not be sober. It's sad that your mind has to wander to those places. But those are some of the experiences that I've had, and I don't ever want anybody to go through those experiences. I don't want anybody to be fearful of dating online. I don't think we need to live in a world of fear, because I don't think that's healthy either. I think that you should be open to meeting people and open to new experiences, but just have some sense of guarded, have some sense of yourself where you are keeping yourself guarded, whether it's your emotions, whether it's physically you're aware of just your surroundings. Those are things that when it comes to online dating and dating in general, the rules have changed. We have access to hundreds and hundreds of people. Calling each other, meeting up with each other in person isn't a go-to anymore. If a guy doesn't get what he wants from one girl, he can just keep swiping. If a woman doesn't get what she wants from one guy, she can keep swiping. Or they can lie straight to your face about, what they are doing. And I think you can figure that out. I think it's harder for a lot of people to lie in person. So I think if my one piece of advice to leading to something that's more on a serious to realistic, stable relationship or way of figuring out if this person's really interested in you is meeting them in person. The faster you can meet up with them in person, the less you talk through text, the better. Because even my boyfriend and I recently had an argument, straight up argument. Not even gonna lie about what it was. We had an argument, and it was more or less the fact that we had a moment where the both of us were communicating our feelings, and the way it was being communicated was via text. We both took it and spun it into something completely different because we weren't having a verbal conversation. We didn't understand the tone. We didn't understand where we were coming from. And then the both of us kind of twisted and turned it into something it wasn't in our own minds. And also and then the fact that we didn't talk on the phone, we didn't stop in that moment to call each other and have a conversation about it. The fact that it got perpetuated for a couple of days, wasn't ideal. The minute we eventually sat down in person and talked out our feelings, talked about how we were feeling, talked about where, both persons' fault, where I was at fault, where he was at fault, what we meant, how we feel, where our concerns lie for the future, and how we're gonna move on, and what worked and what didn't work, and that was we got over it. Pretty much right after that conversation, I was over it. It takes me a little bit longer to get over things and to let go of things because that's just how I am. I also sometimes I just need space, and I need to mentally kind of figure out and let go of the anger and get past the angry phase, because when I get going, I just get pissed the fuck off, and I can't let that go right away, and I need some time to let it go. And in this situation, I needed a couple days to let it go, and it was just getting perpetuated by the both of us. And it took a couple days for me to apologize, and I'm going to totally admit fault to that. It took me a couple days to just say I'm sorry and to genuinely mean it and to figure out, what I was sorry for and explain to him what I was sorry for, and then figure out, for the both of us to, again, communicate and fill in the blanks for the both of us, and after the situation figure out what fill in the blanks. Communication is the fastest way to figure out whether it's gonna work or whether it's not. To build that trust, you gotta sit down with the person, you gotta look them in the eyes, and you gotta start asking them questions. And if they are hesitant, if they are not, it feels like they're showboating, if it feels like they are, got this mask on of being somebody that, you can see pretty quickly if somebody's being genuine or not. And I am somebody who realized very quickly, probably while I was in high school, that I am going to be myself. And it's exhausting to pretend to be somebody you're not. I have no shame in who I am. I have no shame in the things I'm interested in. And I have no time to pretend to be somebody I'm not. Just my reality right now. I work a full-time job. I have full-time goals in the sense that the races that I do and the videos that I want to make and the content I want to create, I don't have time. It's exhausting to be myself. I can't imagine trying to be somebody that I'm not on top of that. It's just not realistic. Eventually, people are going to read the phoniness, or you're going to eventually believe your phoniness so much so that you're just going to be an intolerable person to be around. What else? Let me take a swig and then we'll continue on. But to be honestly, I think at the end of the day, that was the time, the minute I started being myself 100% and very obviously putting myself out there in the sense of not having shame and, liking the things that I like, guys started to respect that a lot more and were surprised and were realizing that, genuine people out there exist and are interested in the things that they're interested in. Maybe it just didn't work out for us because for whatever reason, there just wasn't a spark, but people that are into the same things you are exist out there. What else? I I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. This wasn't even really talking about terrible, like, Tinder dates or anything. I don't know. I can't honestly, like, I feel like, I think I realized today, and I realized, thinking about putting this podcast together, why I was having such a hard time, like, trying to pinpoint, like, the bullet points or, like, where to start, is because I've mostly, like, blacked out and realized that I've, like, now that I've been in a relationship for, even a couple of months, I've just kind of, like, forgotten the past, so much so that I can't even remember any of the terrible dates. It's like all the terrible experiences were worth having the person that I have now in my life and being with the person that I'm with now in my life. Like, he is just... I've had so many weird, fucked up situations, and I've never been in a quote-unquote normal relationship, that when I finally met him and we started seeing each other, for like the first 2 weeks, and I've admitted this to him countless times, and I've admitted this to a lot of people, he was so normal, and he is so normal, that I didn't know what to do with him. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how to be. I was so puzzled. I was just like, what do I do with it? Baby, Jeff, you're wonderful, and I hope that you're listening. You're not offended. But I didn't know what to do with him for the longest time. For a period of time, I didn't know how to react, because I was just waiting for this shoe to drop. I was waiting for, like, the act to drop, and, like, for him to be like, by the way, I've got a girlfriend, or, I'm married, or, I'm, whatever, I'm not into this, or I'm over this, or just disappear. Honestly, I think more than anything, not that I was actually seriously expecting him, because I didn't think that he was this kind of a person. I got the vibe pretty quickly from him, and, like, everything he was talking about and everything he told me. I didn't think he was this kind of person, but it was almost like a natural reaction that had been, like, it was this weird bad habit that I had learned over so many years, to almost expect the worst, in the sense that I expected him to just disappear, or for it to be too good to be true. This is one of those situations where in the past, where I felt like it was too good to be true, but in this situation, I've never had a moment where I thought it was too good to be true, or felt like there was an impending doom. Like this, when people say that it's meant to be easy, God, they couldn't be any more right. It shouldn't be hard. It shouldn't be complicated. I don't think relationships need to be complicated. I think that they shouldn't be hard. I think, yeah, arguments happen. Absolutely. I think if we didn't argue, I would be bored out of as long as it has already. Honestly, like, I'm happy about the fact that he and I have had conflict, or that we don't see eye to eye on everything, or that we have opposing opinions, because that's what's added a layer of interest to this relationship, and that's what makes our relationship interesting. He can come to me and have conversations with me about topics because he wants to see what my opinion's going to be like, or how I feel about it, or what I think about it. And I do the same with him. As weird as I am, and the conspiracy, like, I'm 100% on the conspiracy train of just about everything, and I love it. The fact that we spent one night on, I think it was like a Friday night, we watched the Bob Lazar documentary. We went out, we bought a whole bunch of beer, came back, sat and watched that documentary, and then, like, talked about a whole bunch of stuff. We talked about the documentary, what we didn't like, what we liked, and that, to have conversation. Yes, the sex is really important for me in a relationship, but the conversation for me is so much more important as well. Like, it's I think I would say it's even more important, because at the end of the day, if I can't have a conversation with you that's meaningful or insightful or enlightening or anything, like, it has no layers, God, I'm gonna be bored, and it's not gonna last, because I need to be challenged with the other person that I'm with on a healthy level. And I think being challenged in conversation is healthy. It's a healthy challenge. I think it's important to be able to have a great verbal back and forth and a dialogue where somebody can teach you on some level. We don't have to agree. As I always say, you and I don't have to agree. We don't have to have the same opinions about everything. We don't have to agree. But as long as we both can have a conversation where we both express both of our sides, and then from there, if we can you know, at the end of the day, we can come to the end of the conversation. If we don't agree still, that's fine. But I can almost guarantee I will think about that conversation in the future, whether it's a week from now, whether it's 6 months from now, whether it's a year from now. And maybe in the future, that will help to either change my opinion or be insightful and give me a different perspective. I'm all about opposing conversations because I like to see what makes people tick and why they so deeply believe in what they believe. And I'm interested in hearing about what makes somebody tick. I like having those conversations. I want to know why you're weird. I want to know what makes you you, or why you so deeply believe in what you believe. Even though I may think you're crazy or I may not agree with you, I want to hear it because it's an interesting perspective into how different we all are as human beings, and I find that interesting. So I think that's it. I'm in a wonderful, happy relationship for the first time in my entire life, and that's amazing, and it leaves me speechless. And I'm so grateful that I was able to communicate right off the bat to somebody that I wanted a relationship built on trust, honesty, and communication about whatever it is. I don't care whatever it is you're struggling with or you don't agree with, or if you strongly disagree with some aspect of me or what it is, I want to hear it, because if you hide things from me, it's never going to work. It's never ever going to work. You're going to resent me in the future for whatever reason it is. It's going to bubble up in some other shape or form. I would rather us talk about the positives and the negatives, and all of the negatives, because that's the only way we're going to be able to move forward in our lives, whether it's together, hopefully, or not. And it saves people a lot of time. And I think in a world where it's fast, things are moving so quickly, and how quickly you filter through people, the faster you can communicate what it is you want from somebody, the faster you're going to be saved a lot of heartache. You're going to be able to find what you're looking for, and you're going to be able to meet people that on some level you connect with or you don't connect with, and you can keep moving forward. I can't believe I'm sitting in 2019 admitting the fact that I found a healthy, stable person on a dating app. But ladies and gentlemen, those people exist. But yeah, all right. I think that's it. I think that's all I got to say. I think I feel good. I feel lighter. I hope it was insightful. It was kind of scattered, I think. It kind of touched on a lot of weird topics. I hope that we can all have a conversation in the comment section down below, whether you're on YouTube. If you want to reach out to me via Instagram, that's where I'm most active on. I will link all my profiles there. Let me pull them up so I have them accurate for all of you lovely people if you want to reach me. All my profiles are that I'm going to mention are public, so hence if you guys want to reach me, I will let you know which ones are the most reachable. And Max is freaking the F out behind me. So if you want to reach me, the best way and the fastest way for the profile of this lovely podcast, it is That Blonde Girls Podcast. For my YouTube channel, Instagram, it's Reviews by the Blonde, and my personal Instagram is Carolyn_W3. My Twitter account, which I'm not a big Twitter person. I don't know what it is. I think it's just I never learned how to properly use it, and I don't really understand the culture of it, so that's necessarily why I don't use it all that much. But if you guys want to reach out to me via Twitter, it is Blonde Reviewer. If you guys want to get me via there's that outlet as well. I mean, I do have it on my phone, so I will get the notification eventually. I have tried to become a little bit better with responding to the comments on my YouTube channel. Bear with me, guys. I'm still trying to figure out how to balance everything, and I hope I'm, doing you guys justice. I genuinely am happy that I'm finally, I've like just built this new thing and that I'm doing it, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. Please thumbs it up if you guys are. Please, you know, leave comments in the comment section. Let me know. Subscribe. Give me a shout out on Instagram. Follow me there if you guys want to know what podcasts are coming up, what content is coming up. I am trying to get better at posting things, and now that I'm not sick anymore, I'm going to be doing a lot of things are coming up the next couple of weeks and weekends, and our adventure vlog, our very first adventure vlog as a couple, will be coming up sometime this week. I've been having a lot of issues with, of course, it's like the second I want to do any digital work on my computer, it's just like a waterfall, no pun intended, no insight on the vlog intended, but it's like the second I want to do one thing, then I have to do something else which leads to something else, and which leads to something else, and it's just like it takes hours to just get to like to get to point B. I just dropped my mic. I apologize. The little snowball decided to escape from me, so I apologize again, headphone users. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So that's it. I will see you guys next time. I hope you guys are having a wonderful evening, a wonderful afternoon or morning, whenever you guys are listening or watching to this. I hope you guys are enjoying whatever's in your glass or mug or cup or container of choice. I'm going to finish this whiskey. I'm going to upload all this for you guys, and I will see you guys hopefully hear from you guys next week. Adios, muchachos, and have a good night.